What's up, everybody? We are in 1 Kings 16, chapter 16, roughly page 370 in the scriptures. Everybody asks all the time, yo, Bear, what's the scriptures? And I think many of y'all assume that I'm speaking about the Bible when I say the scriptures. And I am, except that I'm also speaking about a specific translation of the Bible called the scriptures. Look at your screen. See that? That's the scriptures. And you can find it from ISR, India, Sierra, Romeo, Messianic.org. You can also buy them at our cost from grindstoneministries.com. And it is a new translation, relatively new as of 2009, updated in 2016, predicated on zero political BS in the translation. Like the King James and many others. It went to the original source texts to the best of their ability to preserve the original wording of both the Old Testament and the New Testament, the Hebrew and the Greek. So that's why I like it. I have an entire video. If you just search in the YouTube search bar, Bear Independent Bible, you will find a video on the scriptures, why I use this translation. I now have 14 translations of the Bible. So don't think that for a moment that what I'm saying when we read this word together is predicated on this translation only. This is just my EDC Bible, my everyday carry Bible. I have multiple other translations and I enjoy diving into them. But this is the one that I read daily, and it's the one that I read on camera with you. So if you want a copy of this, www.isr-messianic.org or grindstoneministries.com. Okay, every week, same question every week. I'm going to get a pre-roll banner that just pops up with the scriptures. Hey, Bear, what Bible is that? It's the scripture. Okay. 1 Kings 16, page 370-ish in the scriptures. Then the word of Yahweh came to Yehu. Yahweh is the Lord your God. Yod-He, Vav-He. Yahweh came to Yehu, the son of Hanani, against Baasha, saying, what do you mean, then the word? Then. All right, so if we go back a few verses, because context is king. And there was fighting between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, all their days. So Asa was the king of Judah. Baasha was the king of Israel. Remember now that Israel, the father's chosen people, the 12 tribes, the 12 sons of Jacob, has split. And we have the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel. Kingdom of Judah being the tribe of Judah, the tribe of Benjamin, and most of the tribe of Levi, the Levites, who didn't have an inheritance in the land. They were in service to the tabernacle and then the temple. And then the tribe, or the house of Israel, the kingdom of Israel, is everybody else. Gad, Manasseh, Ephraim, Naphtali, so forth and so on. Okay? So all the other tribes. And there is division in the land, almost like an ongoing civil war between the house of Israel, the kingdom of Israel, and the house of Judah, or the kingdom of Judah. And so at this point, there are two kings, much like during the American Civil War, there were two presidents, right? Excuse me, homemade gummy bears. And so, in the 3rd year of Asa, king of Judah, Baasha, son of Ahijah, became the king over all Israel in Tirzah, and reigned 24 years. And he did evil in the eyes of Yahweh, and walked in the way of Jeroboam, and in his sin, by which he had made Israel sin. So this Baasha dude is a bad dude, and he's following the bad example of Jeroboam, who was the king prior. And that bad example is causing all of the house of Israel to sin. Chapter 16. Then the word of Yahweh came to Yehu, son of Hanani, against Baasha, saying, because I raised you up out of the dust, you were nobody, and made you ruler over my people. This is Yah speaking, the Creator speaking, through through Yehu to Baasha. Yehu is prophesying. Because I raised you up out of the dust and made you ruler over my people Israel, but you walked in the way of Jeroboam. How are we supposed to walk? We were supposed to walk in the way of Messiah, 1 Peter 2:21. You walked in the way of Jeroboam and made my people Israel to sin, to provoke me with their sins, What is sin? 1 John 3 verse 4, transgression of the law, transgressing the word of Yah. By the way, I know you can probably hear a fan in the background, and I know that's occasionally a bit of a distraction for some viewers, but please know that it's necessary for me for two reasons. A, the ambient temperature. B, the number of insects that are in the air. I have to forcefully remove them via the flow of air away from my person so that I can focus to read the word. So please accept my sincerest apologies on the slight background noise. See, I am going to sweep away Baasha and his house, and shall make your house like the house of Jeroboam the son of Nebat. Anyone belonging to Baasha who dies in a city, the dogs eat, and anyone belonging to him who dies in the field, the birds of the heaven eat. So Yah says, hey man, the whole bloodline of Baasha, I'm wiping away. I'm doing away with it. I'm removing it. And interestingly here, we see anyone belonging to him who dies in the field, the birds of the heaven eat. That's reminiscent to me of Revelation verse 19. I'm sorry, chapter 19. I do that all the time. Mix up chapter and verse. Revelation's over here in the back of the book, almost all the way to the end. You'll find Revelation 19. And I usually start at 19:11 for this for context. This is talking about the second coming of Mashiach, of Messiah, Jesus the Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach. And so, you know, I hear people say, I can't wait for the coming of the glory of the Lord. You know what that looks like, right? Because it's pretty rough. Verse 11, and I saw the heaven opened, and there was a white horse, and he who sat on him, Yeshua, was called trustworthy and true, and in righteousness he judges and fights. And his eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, having a name that had been written, which no one had perceived except himself. And having been dressed in a robe dipped in blood, this is of course indicative of the high priest under the Levitical priesthood, and his name is called the Word of Yahweh. And the armies in the heaven, dressed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. And out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall shepherd them with a rod of iron, and he treads the winepress of the fierceness and the wrath of El Shaddai, Father God. And on his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Sovereign of Sovereigns and Master of Masters. And I saw one messenger standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the birds that fly in mid-heaven, come and gather together for the supper of the great Elohim, to eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of commanders, and the flesh of strong ones, and the flesh of horses, and those who sit on them, and the flesh of all people, free and slave, both small and great, hearkening back to Isaiah 66 here. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to fight him who sat on the horse and his army. And the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence, by which he led astray those who received the mark of the beast, and those who worshipped his image. And the two were thrown alive into the lake of burning fire with sulfur. And the rest were killed with the sword which came from the mouth of him, Yeshua. Yeshua killed all these people who weren't following him, who sat on the horse, and all the birds were filled with their flesh. Now it's interesting here. These people who are following the beast, not following Yeshua, become bird food. And all the birds were filled with their flesh. If we flip back over here to 1 Kings 16, verse 4, anyone belonging to Baasha who dies in a city, the dogs eat. And anyone belonging to him who dies in a field, the birds of the heavens eat. Well, where there's a battlefield here, the great supper of Elohim, there's going to be so much slaughter when Yeshua returns on this battlefield. It's interesting how Yeshua, Jesus, is slaughtering those who have gone astray, and that their flesh becomes a supper for the birds. We look at Baasha, anyone belonging to him who dies in the field, the birds of the heaven do eat. Why? Because I raised you up out of the dust and made you ruler over my people Israel. But you walked in the way of Jeroboam and made my people Israel sin to provoke me with their sins. And so Jeroboam was a bad king of Israel. Baasha was a bad king of Israel who led the people astray. And anyone belonging to him who died in the field became bird food. Who do you suppose this beast is? Who do you suppose this opposing army that Yeshua is fighting, that we are fighting with Yeshua in end times? Who do you suppose that is? Well, if we look here, the false prophet, right? The beast system. I think, based upon this and this correlation, is going to be somebody that was within the church, the Big C Christian church. And as I've been saying for a long time, a remnant is not 2 billion people. 2 billion people are bird food. This ties into Matthew 7 verse 21. Master, people talking to Yeshua, have we not prophesied in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and done many mighty works in your name? And I shall say unto them, depart from me, you who work lawlessness, for I never knew you. And there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. You can do all things in the name of Yeshua, if Yah wills it. Cast out demons, heal the sick. You can, dare I say, affect the outcome of things that may have already happened through prayer. Not because of you, because of the name of Yeshua. But if you're not following him, he doesn't know you. The name has inherent power, not you. And there are many who come in his name. He addresses this in Matthew 24. See that you are not deceived, and many shall come in my name. See that you are not deceived. Verse 2 here in 16, because I raised you up out of the dust and made you rule over my people Israel. But you walked in the way of Jeroboam and made my people Israel sin to provoke me with their sins. Yeah, just because you know Yah doesn't mean he knows you. Just because you know Yeshua doesn't mean he knows you. And if you're carrying on in a false paradigm, knowingly, and leading people astray, knowingly, you're bird food. I think that's a really interesting tie-in from 1 Kings 16 to Revelation 19. So now that we're 13 minutes into this video and we're on verse 5, and the rest of the acts of Baasha, what he did and his might, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? And so Baasha slept with his fathers and was buried in Tirzah, and his son Elah reigned in his place. Moreover, the word of Yahweh came by the prophet Yehu, son of Hanani, against Baasha and his house. So not just Baasha, but his son Elah and his house, because of all the evil that he did in the eyes of Yahweh, in provoking him with the work of his hands. Provoking him with the work of his hands. Make no graven images. There is no Yah but Yah. With the work of his hands, in being like the house of Jeroboam, and because he struck them. In the 26th year of Asa, king of Judah, Elah, son of Baasha, began to reign over Israel in Tirzah 2 years. And his servant Zimri, commander of half his chariots, conspired against him, as he was in Tirzah, drinking himself drunk in the house of Artsah, who was over his house in Tirzah. Then Zimri came in and struck him and killed him in the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, and reigned in his place. So, military coup. Got a commander here over half the army under Elah. Elah had a little too much to drink, and Zimri snuck in and struck him and killed him. And it came to be, when he began to reign, Zimri, as soon as he was seated on his throne, that he struck all the household of Baasha. And he did not leave one male, neither of his relatives nor his friends. So Zimri destroyed the entire house of Baasha, according to the word of Yahweh, which he spoke against Baasha by Yehu the prophet, for all the sins of Baasha and the sins of Elah and his son, by which they had sinned, and by which, and I have this underlined, they had made Israel sin in provoking Yahweh Elohim of Israel with their worthlessness. Now, worthless men is how it's translated in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, it's translated men of Baal. And we're going to see here later in 16 how that ties together. But in provoking Yahweh Elohim of Israel with their worthlessness. Now remember up here in verse 7, all the evil that Baasha did in the eyes of Yahweh in provoking him with the work of his hands. You can't even make an altar to Yah out of cut stone. No work of your hands. It's the work of Yah. Think about that. And the parallels between today's megachurches. We'll get deeper into that in a minute. And so, Zimri, even though Zimri was a scumbag, military coup, overthrew the reign, the kingdom of Elah, the son of Baasha, Zimri was still, whether he knew it or not, doing Yah's will by wiping out the bloodline of Baasha. For all the sins of Baasha and the sins of Elah his son, by which they had sinned, and by which they had made Israel sin, in provoking Yahweh Elohim of Israel with their worthlessness. And the rest of the acts of Elah, and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the king of Israel? In the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, Zimri reigned 7 days. Military coup guy reigned 7 days in Tirzah. And the people were encamped against Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines. So the people of Israel were going to war against the Philistines. And the people who were encamped heard it and said, Zimri has conspired and also struck the king. So all Israel set up Omri, the commander of the army, to reign over Israel that day in the camp. So Israel was on the foot over here, setting up camp to attack the Philistines, and I hear that back home, Zimri had a military coup and killed the king. They're like, we're not going to have any of that. We've got this General Omri over here. Omri's now our guy. You look at the level of infighting and literal worthlessness that occurs here when people start straying from the path of Yah. There's a loss of ordination here. These people aren't walking in the ways of Yah, and so they're literally backstabbing each other. They're literally whoring. They are literally bowing down to other gods. And we like to think today as modern day followers of Christ that that's not us. We don't do that. I'm not a whore. I don't stab my brother in the back. I don't blah blah. Yeah, we all do. And praise Yah for the covering of Yeshua, that none of us has earned death because of that. But we all do this. And then wonder why we can't hear the voice of Yah. Wonder why he won't speak to me. Wonder why I'm not experiencing his blessings. And it's like, dude, you're not following the rules in the rule book. Almost as if Deuteronomy 28 is real. If you diligently obey the voice of Yahweh your Elohim, then you will be blessed. Verse 17, and Omri went up and all Israel with him from Gibbethon, and they besieged Tirzah. So they're like, screw the Philistines, we've got problems back at home, we're going to go home to Tirzah, which is where Zimri was. And it came to be when Zimri saw that the city was captured, he went into a high place of the king's house and burned the king's house down upon himself with fire and died. Zimri gave up. He didn't even fight Omri. He saw him coming, went up into a tower at the king's house and set the whole place on fire and killed himself that way. Do these sound like people that have a personal relationship with Yah? Because of the sins which he had sinned in doing evil in the eyes of Yahweh, walking in the ways of Jeroboam, and in his sin which he had committed to make Israel sin. And the rest of the acts of Zimri and the conspiracy he made, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Then the people of Israel were divided into two parts. Half the people followed Tibni, son of Ginath, to make him reign, and the other half followed Omri. But the people who followed Omri were stronger than the people who followed Tibni, son of Ginath. And Tibni died, and Omri reigned. Don't know how Tibni died, but he died. I'm willing to wager there was probably some foul play involved. In the 31st year of Asa, king of Judah, Omri became king over Israel and reigned 12 years. He reigned 6 years in Tirzah. And he bought the hill of Shomeron from Shemer for 2 talents of silver, and built on the hill, and called the name of the city which he built Shomeron, after the name Shemer, owner of the hill, also known as Samaritan. Shomeron, Samaritan. Remember the Samaritans, the woman at the well, when Yeshua asks her to draw water. And she says, what do you, a Yehudi man, a Jewish man, a tribe of Judah man, have with me, a Samaritan woman? Well, remember, Israel and Judah, 2 house, they're split, right? They're split. And Yeshua says to her that deliverance is of the Yehudim. He's of the Yehudim. He's of the tribe of Judah. She says, and he goes, hey, you give me some of that water, I'll give you water that you'll never thirst again. And she goes, oh, Master, I'd love some of that. Where do I get some of that from? And he says, you've heard of Mashiach, you've heard of Messiah, right? She goes, yeah, of course. He says, you're talking to him. Paraphrasing. And so there was a tradition of the Yehudim, the Jews at this time, the tribe of Judah at this time, to avoid where the Samaritans were, Samaria, Shomeron. Why? Well, we can track it all the way back to here, where Omri built Shomeron and did what with it? And Omri did evil in the eyes of Yahweh, and did evil more than all those before him, and walked in all the ways of Jeroboam and Nevat, and in his sin by which he had made Israel sin, provoking Yahweh Elohim of Israel with their worthlessness. So it was an unholy place. They avoided it because it was an unholy place that came out of this 2-house system, the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah, and the infighting and the literal backstabbing, and then the setting up of these high places on the hill, the high places of Shomeron. And the rest of the acts of Omri which he did, and the might that he attained, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? So Omri slept with his fathers and was buried in Shomeron. And Ahab, the son of Omri, his son, reigned in his place. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab, son of Omri, became king over Israel. And Ahab, son of Omri, reigned over Israel in Shomeron 22 years. Well, Ahab was the scumbag amongst scumbags. And Ahab, son of Omri, did evil in the eyes of Yahweh more than all those before him. And it came to be as though it had been a light matter for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nevat, that he took his wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians. And he went and served Baal, and bowed himself to it, and raised up a slaughter place for Baal in the house of Baal, which he had built in Shomeron. And Ahab made an Asherah. We call these today steeples. Google it. Don't take my word for it. Google it, DuckDuckGo it, research it. We call these today steeples. They are phallic symbols carved from wood. They are a holdover of paganism. And raised up slaughter places for Baal in the house of Baal. There is no Yah but Yah, not to Ahab, which he had built in Shomeron. And Ahab made an Asherah. And Ahab did more to provoke Yahweh Elohim of Israel than all the kings of Israel before him. I wonder why the Yehudim, the Jews, are avoiding Shomeron and are having nothing to do with the Samaritans. And yet you see Yeshua at the well with this woman who's had 5 husbands, offering redemption to her as well. She's whored. We can imagine that she has whored, because Yeshua says, and the one that you have now is not your husband, and served other gods and done all these terrible things. And yet he says to her, deliverance is of the Yehudim. I am Mashiach. I am standing here talking to you. I will give you this living water if you just believe in me. There is redemption for her. There's redemption for us as well. And so Yeshua is showing here with the woman at the well in Shomeron that nobody is outside of his capacity for forgiveness and atonement. It's really a powerful thing. And now that you know the historical context of why that's a big deal that he would be there, it's huge. It was built up by Omri and Ahab, and they were complete and utter scumbags. Ahab, son of Omri, did evil in the eyes of Yahweh more than all those before him. He was the worst of the worst. In verse 34, in his days, Hiel of Bethel built Jericho, and he laid its foundations at the cost of Abiram, his firstborn, and at the cost of his youngest son, Seguv, he set up its gates, according to the word of Yahweh, which he had spoken through Yehoshua, son of Nun. So things are so bad at this point in Israel that this guy Hiel, under the leadership of Ahab, builds Bethel. He's from Bethel, builds Jericho. And Jericho is literally founded on dead children. Now if we flip, it says, spoken through Yehoshua, son of Nun. Joshua 6, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Yehoshua, Joshua 6, verse 26. And Yehoshua, Joshua, warned them at the time, saying, cursed is the man before Yahweh who rises up and builds this city Jericho. He lays its foundation with his firstborn, and with his youngest he sets up his gates. And Yahweh was with Joshua, Yehoshua, and a report about him was in all the land. So, the sin is rampant in Israel at this point because they are not just transgressing the word of Yah, they don't give a crap anymore about what Yah said. They are literally bowing down to other gods. It doesn't take much for me to say that there are many good-hearted Christians that don't know any better yet, that are currently bowing down to other gods. Christmas and Easter being prime examples, neither of which has anything to actually do with Messiah. I would recommend that you do the research on your own. They're not biblical. They're pagan holdovers. Why are you bowing down to an evergreen tree on the winter solstice? Why are you celebrating the fertility of the rabbit and the egg on the spring equinox? Those are other gods. Yahweh your Elohim, the Lord your God, hates that. And yet, Yeshua still comes for you at the well after you've whored, after you've served other gods, and offers you this living water. If you would just believe in him and teshuvah, repent, turn from your wicked ways, and acknowledge that he is Mashiach, that he is Messiah, and serve him. But see, we need to serve him in truth and in love. And the truth is, this Bible and what it says is far different than modern Christendom. It's far different than modern Judaism. It's far different than anything that the vast majority of people will be taught on a Sunday morning anywhere around the world. And so I feel like Yeshua is crying out to us sometimes through these pages, going, how do you not get this? So all I can do is encourage you to continue to read your word and operate in truth. And if you are a Christ follower, that's what Christian means. It was a derogatory term derived from the Greek Christios, which meant a follower of Christ, which is a title, not a name. The anointed of Yahweh or Elohim is what Christ means. If you are a follower of the chosen of Yah, shouldn't you be doing what he did? He kept the Passover, read the Gospels. He kept Sukkot, he kept Shavuot, read Acts chapter 2. His apostles kept the feasts. He ate clean. He wore the zitziot, the tassels. The woman with the issue of blood touches the, King James says hem, but the Hebrew word there is zitziot, the tassels. He wore those. And we know that he kept the Sabbath because we can read in all 4 Gospels that he was in the temple on the Sabbath as was his custom. Why are we not doing this? Because it doesn't fit the Christian narrative of bowing down to false gods. And Ahab, son of Omri, did evil in the eyes of Yahweh more than all those before him. And it came to be as though it had been a light matter for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nevat, that he took his wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians. And he went and served Baal, and bowed himself to it, and raised up a slaughter place for Baal in the house of Baal, which he had built in Shomeron. And Ahab made an Asherah, and Ahab did more to provoke Yahweh Elohim of Israel than all the kings of Israel before him. And I would submit that the provocation of the creator of the universe will probably end poorly for everyone. Ahab, me, you, anybody else who is knowingly outside the will of the Father. Bless y'all. Shalom.